Hi boys and girls, this is Mrs. Scales and this is my lesson on the respiratory system. Just to make some connection with what's going on with the news right now, the coronavirus, COVID-19, is an infectious disease of the respiratory system. So a lot of what you're going to see today in my presentation is going to tie in with the coronavirus and just infectious diseases. Also, we're going to learn about the functions of the respiratory system, gas exchange, and just the parts of the system. All right, so make sure you type in your notes onto your online science notebook, and that will count as your grade for notes today. All right, so let's go ahead and get started. So the first thing is the functions of the respiratory system. There's two I want you to know. One is that oxygen moves into the body using the lungs and all the parts of your respiratory system. The second thing is that carbon dioxide moves out of the respiratory system and your lungs helps to push that out. Now, just a little thing about carbon dioxide is that carbon dioxide is actually a waste that our body makes. If you think back to your cells, whenever cells are going through their chemical reactions and everything, they produce carbon dioxide. What happens is that carbon dioxide gets into your blood and it moves through your circulatory system, which eventually gets up to your lungs. And then when it gets up to your lungs, that's when you breathe it out. So carbon dioxide is something that we actually make inside of our cells. Now, you probably wondered this before, and this question I want you to think about is, why do we even need oxygen in the first place? So you probably have always kind of wondered that. Yes, we know if we don't have oxygen, we can't survive. But why? Why is that? So the first thing is that you need to know is that oxygen is actually needed for a process called respiration. Respiration, it happens at the cellular level, so down to the microscopic cells. And what happens is in these cells, they take in our oxygen, they take in the nutrients from our food, they work together to create energy. So you probably heard before that food gives us energy, but you probably didn't really think about it that your oxygen also gives you your energy, which makes sense because you need oxygen to survive. And if you don't have oxygen, you can't live. So basically what ends up happening is if you don't have any oxygen, you don't have any energy, and then your body dies. So you need both of those things to make energy, the oxygen and the nutrients from your food, which is called glucose. It's a type of sugar. All right, and just one little point here I want to make is that respiration, a lot of times you hear that with meaning the same thing as breathing. But cell respiration is a little different from breathing. Cell respiration is this chemical reaction that helps you to make energy. Breathing is when you take in air and also get rid of air through inhaling and exhaling. So that's when you move air into your lungs and out of your lungs. So those two things are definitely different from one another. All right, so here's a picture to show you that they are different processes. Breathing is when you take in oxygen through your nose or through your mouth, as you can see in the picture right here with the little boy. And then what happens is your oxygen moves down to your lungs. Your lungs have a part to them called alveoli, which is connected to your circulatory system. That oxygen moves into your blood. And then once the blood gets to your cells, which you can see in this picture, your mitochondria, which makes your energy for your cell, takes in that oxygen and also takes in the nutrients from your food to make energy. In the process, they also make carbon dioxide waste. You can see the little red arrow coming here. That's the carbon dioxide waste. Eventually, the waste gets into your blood, goes up to your lungs, and you breathe it out. So both of these processes are different, but they're connected to one another. All right, so how is it that air actually moves into your body? So the first thing is it gets into your nose. Inside of your nose, there's mucus and these little tiny hairs called cilia. Cilia and this mucus traps in any particles that might be dangerous to you, like bacteria, also dust, pollution, anything you can think of gets trapped into the mucus. And then what is left behind, the air, goes to your throat. Inside of your throat, you actually have two pipes. Remember, we talked about that with digestive system. One pipe is for your air, which is called the trachea, and another pipe is your esophagus. That's where your food goes. Whenever you swallow your food, the epiglottis covers your trachea so that you don't get food down your windpipe and choke and die. Ugh, not good. And then what happens when you're breathing, air goes down through that windpipe down to your lungs. So all of this happens at the pharynx, okay, which is your throat. The next part, and you can actually feel this, is your voice box. If you take and rub your throat where your Adam's apple is, you'll feel some cartilage. With your voice box, the larynx, you also have your vocal cords. And that's where your sound and your voice comes out of. The next thing is your trachea. This is your windpipe. So this actually connects to the bronchi. And the trachea, or your windpipe, is where you do not want your food or water to go down because that will choke you. So again, this is different from the esophagus. It takes in just air. The next thing is the bronchi. If you look in this picture here, you can see where the bronchi are. They actually direct air into the lungs. You probably have heard of bronchi from bronchitis before. Bronchitis is when you get an infection in the bronchi tubes, and that just makes it where you get a really bad cough, and you just feel like congested and all that stuff. Bronchitis can also be caused by bacteria. So usually you get antibiotics to help clear it up. All right, the next pathway of air, once it's directed by the bronchi to go into either lung. And the lung is the major organ of the respiratory system. The lungs, we have one on either side of our heart. We have two lungs, and they do inflate whenever they fill up with air, and they deflate and they get smaller whenever you exhale. All right, this next part is technically inside of the lungs, and that's the alveoli, which you can see here. The alveoli are these little tiny little grape-like structures that are connected to our circulatory system, and they help with gas exchange. All right, so repeat after me so you can remember the pathway of air. All right, so we have nose, pharynx, larynx, trachea, bronchi, lungs, and alveoli. Sounds like you're saying ravioli. But the alveoli is where gas exchange actually occurs. So make sure you know this pathway and make sure you can pronounce each of the words. So if you need to, you can go back on the video, listen to me repeat that again so you can practice saying them. All right, here's a picture to show you what happens with oxygen at the lungs. So the first thing is that whenever we inhale, yes, we can inhale through either our nose or through our mouth, and that eventually gets down to our lungs. Well, I want you to notice here, boys and girls, is that the heart, which is in between your lungs, is connected to all these blood vessels that go and branch into your lungs. So whenever you breathe in oxygen, where this pink structure here, that's your lung, oxygen moves in and attaches to your red blood cells. Remember last week we talked about with circulatory system, your red blood cell carries oxygen, and that oxygen circulates throughout your body by the red blood cell. Once the red blood cell goes to other tissues and cells of your body, it drops the oxygen off, and it kind of feeds that oxygen to your cells so they can stay alive. All right, so this next thing is how we inhale and how we exhale. The main thing that you need to know from this slide is that we all have this muscle called the diaphragm. The diaphragm sits just like right underneath your lungs. And what happens is when that diaphragm moves up and down, that's what expands your chest whenever you inhale, and whatever makes your chest smaller when you exhale. So if you just do this right quick, put your hands, okay, right below and kind of like at the top of your belly, but below your lungs, and just kind of like inhale right quick, and then exhale, and you'll feel some movement right there. That's because of your muscle, the diaphragm. If any of you have ever taken singing lessons or sung in chorus, you may hear your chorus teacher say, sing from your diaphragm and kind of pull it from deep down. And there is a diaphragm muscle that sits underneath the lungs that does help with singing. All right, so this is what happens if you'll follow along in the picture with me when you do inhale air. All right, so when you inhale air, that goes through your respiratory system, and the air fills up your lungs. And your lungs, what happens is these two organs here, they fill up and they inflate, sort of like a balloon inflates when you blow it up. At the same time, your diaphragm is pulling down so that you inhale. And then if you look over here off to the side, you can see that your rib cage also expands and your rib muscles contract. That also helps with inhaling. This is a good example, boys and girls, of how your muscular system and your skeletal system is connected with your respiratory system. So if it wasn't for those muscles, like your diaphragm and your rib muscles, you wouldn't be able to breathe that well. All right, and if you look over here on the other side, whenever that diaphragm muscle moves up, the air is forced out of your lungs, out through the respiratory system, and out of your mouth. And at the same time, your rib muscles relax and your rib cage does get smaller. So again, this is good because it shows you how our systems do not work by themselves. Like right here, the skeletal and the muscular system is working with our respiratory system to help us to breathe. All right, this next picture shows you the alveoli. The alveoli, they kind of look like little grapes. Okay, they're tiny little sacs that are covered in capillaries. Capillaries are the smallest and the tiniest of blood vessels, which you can see in the picture here. And whenever blood flows over them, oxygen moves into the blood, and at the same time, carbon dioxide moves out of the blood. All right, so we're going to talk about gas exchange. Gas exchange, if you think about the word exchange, it means to trade something. In this case, what we're trading is oxygen for carbon dioxide. So those are the two things that are being exchanged. If we ever have a gift exchange in class, that means you're trading presents with, and you're trading it for one for the other. So that's what's happening here with gas exchange. So the alveoli, they're hollow sacs surrounded by capillaries, which again are the thin blood vessels. As blood flows through the capillaries, oxygen moves from the alveoli into the blood. So that's the first of the two gases that's being exchanged here. As oxygen is moving in, if you look right here, carbon dioxide is moving out. And that will go from the blood into the alveoli, which again is in your lungs. So that's when you exhale that carbon dioxide. Now we do have a lot of alveoli, which create a large surface area for gas exchange to occur. So we have many of these alveoli, and their job is just to take in oxygen and get rid of carbon dioxide, so that we can make sure that we're getting oxygen into our system. All right, so right here is just another little picture to show you. We have our lungs. They're filled with alveoli. Alveoli are covered by capillaries, and those capillaries take in oxygen and remove carbon dioxide. All right, so that was my lesson on the respiratory system. Make sure you go over the functions, the parts, and gas exchange. Thanks. Bye.